So in the last few weeks, Dragon's Dogma 2 media coverage and hype have reached new heights, and it's just amazing to see the community come together for the sequel. But what concerns me is all the misinformation and false claims coming from other content creators. And the star of the show today is Luke Stevens. Now we are going to properly cover the sources of the 30 FPS claim today, together with the concerns regarding a single save slot and fast travel later in the video. But first, let's talk about this YouTuber and the way he's spreading misinformation on his channel. The danger of spreading false information like this is that although these videos are relatively small, the people watching them might parrot these claims on other media platforms like Reddit and Twitter, where this misinformation again spreads and over time becomes a created reality for many people. Sadly, one of the main reasons these claims even get the foundation to grow as truths on the internet is the fact that Capcom haven't come out yet and given us any information regarding the frame rates we could expect on consoles. Developers usually tend to share this kind of info in their pre-release cycle to inform players who might pre-order their game on PlayStation or Xbox. Now, in this video, he states the following.
Yes, it is also targeting 30 on console.
It's funny how he talks about this like it's some... But in reality, he's just parroting some rumor he found on Twitter from a random source. Luckily, his viewers are sober enough to see through this lack of research behind his claims, and the top comments are picking up on this. But let's dig deeper and find the source of these rumors circulating the internet. The original post was created by a Twitter user named PC Focus. The tweet states the following: Dragon's Dogma 2 reportedly runs on 30 FPS on consoles according to Japanese Insider. The game is confirmed by IGN Japan to feature only one save slot. Auto and manual share the same slot. Now the link he provides for the IGN Japan article about Dragon's Dogma 2 contains absolutely no information about frame rates whatsoever. I ran the article through Google Translate and they mostly cover information about pawns and the new mechanics we'll see in the sequel. I'll leave a link for the article in the description if you guys want to check it out as well. Of course, when scrolling through his other posts and his general content, it's easy to see that this is just another cesspool of the internet where there are really no regard for the reputation of other companies and their intellectual property. So now that we have proven that these rumors are just baseless tweets without any credibility, let's look at the actual footage from the latest trailer captured on PS5. It's important to remember that the footage for this trailer is recorded in 4K resolution, and by the looks of it, they have optimized their gameplay for maximum quality, as developers usually do for their big trailers and showcases of this kind. But I'm pretty sure the finished version on PS5 will have a performance option like we saw in Elden Ring. This option would target 60 FPS, while the quality mode gave 40+ frames as showcased here. When putting the trailer file into my timeline in DaVinci Resolve, I can analyze the recording frame by frame and quickly see if it's locked in 60 FPS, 30 FPS or something in between. And this is what I found during my testing. The first clip when the dragon drops down from the rift is locked in 60 FPS. The following short scenes was all around 35 to 40 FPS. The massive scene with the dragon was around 35 FPS, while fighting the Minotaur we got 40 FPS. The first scene showing dips below 30 FPS was as expected when the sorcerer is casting his frost spell, where we only got 25 FPS. When fighting the wight at nighttime, we again got stable 40 FPS. And in this clip we get 60 FPS locked. In summary, we get a solid 60 FPS in all the cutscenes showcased here. In the combat scenes we would get a stable 40 FPS, and in the most intensive scenes our FPS would drop to under 30. With these findings we can finally debunk the misinformation regarding the game targeting 30 FPS locked on consoles. As we clearly see, it's targeting 60 FPS with the majority of the combat getting solid 40 FPS. And it looks like Capcom is targeting the same FPS standards we saw for Elden Ring on PS5, with 60 FPS on performance mode and around 40 FPS on quality mode. With that out of the way, let's talk about the single save slot controversy and how it's a deal breaker for many players coming from games with multiple save slots. Now, for those who played the first game, where we also had one save slot, we already know why they want to keep this unchanged in the sequel. The first and most important reason is of course the pawn mechanic, and how other players are able to get assistance from the the pawn you have created through the rift. Let's imagine if we had 3 save slots and a different pawn created in each of them. Which one would be shared through the rift with other players? It would cause both technical and lore implications, which is why it makes sense we only have 1 save slot in the sequel as well. Having only 1 save slot also gives your actions and choices more weight to them, in turn making the game more realistic, which is a clear focus for Itsuno in the sequel. I would make the argument that having 1 save slot in Dragon's Dogma is far less of a problem when compared to, let's say, Elden Ring and Souls games. In these games, your build is often determined by the weapons you want to choose and what stats those scale best with. That means if you're cosplaying Guts with a heavy focus on strength, that save file would not be able to utilize or even wield weapons requiring more points into dexterity. In these games, your choice of weapons and needed stats will eventually lock you out from experimenting with different builds, thus making the need of multiple save slots very clear. In Dragon's Dogma, on the other hand, your weapons don't scale with any stats and there are only level requirements to wield them. Together with the fact that you can swap between all your vocations on a max level character, you can effectively access all the content the game has to offer in terms of weapons, playstyles and builds. While min-maxing was a thing in the first game, and players would argue they needed certain stats to effectively play a vocation, it was your equipment that ultimately mattered in terms of damage output. But in the sequel, at least from what we can gather from the different showcases so far, it looks like your stats no longer are fixed as you level up, but instead allocated dynamically like we saw in Dragon's Dogma Online. This completely reduces the drawback of changing vocations during your playthrough, since you would be optimized for your current class at all times. With this new way of allocating stats in the sequel, and the option to switch builds freely, I think the need for multiple save slots is not really there anymore. That being said, having multiple saves to back up your progress is something I do myself, and luckily you can do that easily on both PC and consoles. The last thing I want to cover today is the concern people have with the fast travel system in the sequel. So what you have showcased so far is the introduction of a new way of transportation where you can travel between specific locations at a low cost, but with the risk of getting ambushed mid-journey. This will probably be our only way of fast travel until we get to the point when we can afford fairy stones. These are expensive single-use items that instantly transport you to the port crystals on the map. Although the price may seem high compared to the cheap ox carts, I'm pretty sure that later in our journey we can afford these comfortably. In the first game we also got access to an eternal fairy stone with unlimited uses for free. It still remains to be revealed if this item will return in the sequel, but with these 3 options for fast travel in the sequel, I'm pretty sure players coming from games like Elden Ring will get used to this new way of experiencing an open world RPG as well.